It's all about the discussion on advocacy, and we want to ground that in what's been happening around us in the past year and a half. The COVID-19 crisis has exposed systemic problems that migrant women workers have long understood: informality in the economy, weak healthcare systems, lack of a social safety net, structural racism, gender discrimination, precarious jobs, and inhumane migration regimes. Moreover, migrant women have shown that they are so-called essential workers, providing medical care, working in home care, especially with children and the elderly, working throughout the food chain, supply chain, cleaning industries, and much more during this pandemic and in an ongoing way. All these sectors have traditionally been undervalued, underpaid, and exploited, and this has not changed during this pandemic. Yet this critical period has also demonstrated that migrant women workers are leading resistance movements globally. Migrant women workers have always played a strong role in grassroots activism, yet in the corridors of power, they are far too often invisible. Today, we're joined by 4 courageous women who have used different advocacy strategies to advance the rights of migrant women workers by using regional or global institutional spaces and instruments such as the ILO Domestic Workers Convention 189, which this year marks its 10th anniversary, the more recent ILO Convention 190 on violence and harassment in the world of work, and the 2018 UN Global Compact for Migration, as well as other regional civil society initiatives, such as the Permanent People's Tribunal in Europe. Their experiences will shed light on how we leverage our feminist strengths to create gender-responsive policy mechanisms today. What advocacy strategies targeted at improving labor migration policies have succeeded or failed? And how do we build a grassroots advocacy movement towards an intersectional feminist agenda by and for migrant women workers? I'm really, really pleased to introduce to you and for us to hear from 4 amazing organizers and leaders. They include Francia Blanco from Citra do Trans in Nicaragua, Fish Ip from the International Domestic Workers Federation, Jille Belisario from Fairwork, and Tola Ositelu from the International Trade Union Confederation. And we're going to start with Fish. Fish is currently the Asia Regional Coordinator for the International Domestic Workers Federation. Ms. Ip is a union organizer for domestic workers. She's the founding organizer for the Hong Kong Domestic Workers General Union, established in 2001, and the Hong Kong Federation of Asian Domestic Workers Unions, founded in 2010. FADWU organizes local and migrant domestic workers with different nationalities. She started to work at the regional coordinator for the International Domestic Workers Network in 2009, towards the adoption of the International Labor Convention 189 on domestic workers. And this whole session on advocacy that we're doing, we want to learn from the experiences of people like Fish and the domestic workers on how you went about organizing for one of the most amazing successes we've had in recognizing that domestic workers work. So how did you organize around 189, and what would it take for migrant women workers to put their labor rights on the global agenda in a similar and complementary way today? Fish, welcome. Thank you.
Thank you, Carol. Thank you for the organizers and everybody who is joining here. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. My name is Fish from the International Domestic Workers Federation. The federation is the membership, the affiliates are membership-based organizations of domestic workers around the world. Currently, we have some over 80 affiliates from 63 countries we have organized over 600,000 domestic workers around the world. The C189 is a big victory for all of us. I was very happy and feel honored to be among with the domestic workers, sisters and brothers in this victory and in the fight. And the victory is based from and it's done by the domestic workers who have been working in many private households, who have been denied to communication, even day offs, and a lot of labor and human rights that and abuses that they are facing. So the C189, which the International Labour Convention 189 Decent Work on Domestic Workers, was adopted in 2011, June 16. So June 16 is our International Domestic Workers Day since then. Before that, we did have a lot of mobilization to fight for this International Labour Convention. We have had domestic workers organized in different places. The leadership have been reaching out to the domestic workers here and there, discuss on the issues and rights. And then in 2006, thanks to the International and Global Union Federation,